Have you ever felt that you as a woman may not appear to measure up when you see incredible women in strong roles? You may be surprised when hearing from women in these positions and how we all share many of the same challenges. Thank you for joining us for the SheEO Lead-In podcast with Rebecca Jones as we share the journeys of women.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Jones, your host of SheEO Lead-In. We are on an exploration together to discover more about the personal journeys of incredible women in both career and life. We all have paths to share that sometimes take incredible turns, deep resilience, and courage to navigate. My hopes are that the challenges shared here encourage women to take leaps of faith and growth when a journey feels too difficult or unachievable. There is great strength deep within each one of us. These stories are meant to share the ways strong women have taken their dreams to strive and thrive to new heights, despite their sometimes rocky paths, and found a way to lead in. Today we are here with Sandra Coufal, the CEO of Toragen Incorporated. How are you today, Sandra?
Good. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm so excited to have you with us today and really am thrilled to hear all about your fascinating job. It really is very exciting. But I want to start with a fun story about your childhood, if you happen to have one that you'd like to share with us today.
Gosh. Well, one story about my childhood that's unanticipated is I actually lived on the island of Puerto Rico for the first about 6 years of my life.
Wow.
So that was very interesting. I spoke Spanish and French before English. Wow. So I'm not a native English speaker. And I'm told that I don't have an accent in English. And I also don't have an accent in Spanish. So I think that's unusual.
That really is. And to be honest, I was actually, as you were telling me that story, I'm like, wait a minute, I hear nothing. So no, I would agree. You do not have an accent of any sort. But that's really cool because you can communicate with a lot of people under a lot of different circumstances. And that's very helpful, I think, in life. So just thinking about you and your temperament and all of that, what is one word that you think describes you the best?
I am calm under fire. That's probably what describes me the best.
Yeah.
I'm a physician who trained at Dallas County Hospital, where they took JFK, Parkland Memorial Hospital, which is a 1,000-bed hospital for medical school and internal medicine residency, so 7 years total. And high volume, high trauma, a lot of severe illness and advanced illness. So there were a lot of things happening at that time. This was before computers were in hospitals. And we had pagers and we're running up and down stairs for, emergency cases. And so my, characteristic that I was known for was that I was very cool and calm. I never really raised my voice. I just told them what I needed, and that's how we did things.
Well, Sandra, just talking about pagers for 1 second and the stress level that I think they induce, a lot of our listeners have no idea what that actually even sounds like, but that high-pitched beeping noise, it was annoying, and it was incessant.
Incessant. And at that time, you had several because they were for different purposes.
Oh my gosh.
So all around my waist, I had several on me, and that was stress in itself because, you just never know which one is going to go off and where you're going to need to go. Well,
one time I only had a pager for a short while. I was a loan officer. It fell into the toilet at SeaWorld, and I thought, oh, praise the Lord. I'm so happy. Luckily, it was before I had done my business, but I literally was thinking to myself, I'm so glad that I don't have to listen to it for the rest of the afternoon, because sometimes you really do need to disconnect. So anyway, just how long have you been in your current career, and what led you to it? Because starting out as a physician and then now you're working for a different kind of, still in the health field, but a very different part of the health field. Tell us explain how that all happened.
So that also is a quite interesting story. I practiced internal medicine for about 8 years, and we had started out, I'd gotten newly married, practiced 6 years at Scripps Clinic here at the Torrey Pines site, and became division head of the Torrey Pines site of internal medicine. And my husband, who finished 9 years of training as a neurosurgeon after medical school, decided that he wanted to go somewhere where he could see all different kind of cases. And so we moved to Kansas City, of all places, for a couple of years. And after 2 winters there, with 2 little boys at the time, I said, we have to move back to San Diego because I would like to raise them to where they can go outside and enjoy our beautiful county. Yeah. So we moved back, and I was touring houses with my friend who happened to be the wife of Dr. Richard Lerner, who was the long-term president of the Scripps Research Institute, who knew me as a clinician. I had shared several very unusual patients with some of the professors at Scripps Research Institute. And we were in her home in La Jolla, and the garage door went up with her 2 dogs. And she said, "Who's that?" And I said, "I don't know, but we're both here by ourselves." Well, it was Richard. And he never came home at 3 p.m. He never came home before nightfall. And he walked in the house, and as his typical personality, he said, "So, are you really coming back?" Didn't say hello or anything. And I said, "Yes, we just were looking for houses." And he said, "Well, you're not going to waste yourself anymore in clinical medicine, are you?" And I said, "Well, I just interviewed. I was going to do a concierge practice." And he said, No, you don't even know what you're supposed to be doing. You need to be in drug development." So he picked up the phone right there on the spot and called the director of Novartis on the West Coast, the Genomics Institute of Novartis Research Foundation, who was Dr. Peter Schultz, who's the current president of the Scripps Research Institute, and said, "I know you need a biomedical advisor, and I've got the best one for you, and if you don't hire her, I will, and we're going to beat you." So he threw down a challenge.
Wow.
I got hired, and I ended up working for GNF for 21 years and have done a number of different chemical polymer companies that have developed 2 drugs that are on the market up in Silicon Valley with the polymer chemists of Dr. Peter Schultz.
Wow.
So that has been quite a journey into biotech. And since that time, in the midst of all of that, I had 2 companies bought and 2 go public on the NASDAQ. And I was a public company director for 5 years for the last one. And I also started a venture capital firm to fund some of my companies with my youngest brother. I'm one of 5 siblings. I'm number 2, he's number 5. And we're 2 doctors, 2 lawyers, and an investment banker. So he and I started Sibling Capital. To
really?
include,
I love
yes,
that. I love that.
So we've raised money from high net worth individuals, no institutional money, and we were major investors in my 2 public companies and returned very good profit to our investors. So in the midst of all that, I got recruited. There was a search done to be CEO of Toragen, my current company that I've been with since January 2022. And we are an oncology company. We make drugs to treat HPV-induced cancers, and we're currently in a phase 1 trial in 4 sites across the United States. And in the midst of all of that, and the reason I segued into oncology is I got breast cancer 9 years ago and am now a survivor, cancer-free.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. So it has a dear place in my heart.
Well, so HPV, let's talk a little bit about that because I think our listeners, and I have to admit, I feel like I didn't know as much about that I learned from you. If you could just talk a little bit about how that presents in different cancers and that sort of thing, because there isn't really a lot of testing that's available. So if you could explain that a little bit, that'd be great.
So HPV is actually the most common sexually transmitted disease. 85% of us get it when we become sexually active. 90% of us clear it with our own immune system, but 10% do not. And it's in those 10% that cancers can develop 10 to 20 years later. There is no blood test to tell you whether you're one of the 10% that has retained HPV that your immune system hasn't fought off. For women, we recommend an annual pap smear, and we test that tissue for HPV because HPV causes 99% of all cervical cancers. So that's very important to get that annual testing. For men, we don't have tissue testing unless they have a mass, a lump. The most common patient we see is a middle-aged man with a lump in his neck, and it can be an HPV-induced cancer. There is no blood test to tell us whether you've retained HPV. So that's something that we're working on. We currently have the only drug to inhibit one of the proteins that HPV produces, called the E5 protein. We're the only company in the world that has an E5 protein inhibitor. And we're in clinical trials, at 4 different sites. But this technology was licensed from UCSD. So we've created a company around this, and we're currently raising funds to continue the development of our drugs.
So all the women out there, they need to make sure they have their annual pap smear, because this is one of the things that's really important that they're testing for. And I honestly wasn't even aware of that. I knew they tested for several things. I just didn't realize the magnitude of, or the connection, I guess it would be, between the HPV and the different cancers that can be prevented if you actually are getting, and whether you still have HPV. So hopefully, if I've ever had it, that I have actually cleared that in my body. I think people say to me, the doctors, how do they miss these things, or how do they not know these things? I try to remind people, medicine is practicing medicine. We're always learning more all the time. And I think, when we have people out there like you sharing different things with people that are not in the medical field, I think it's really helpful and important. And so anyone that's curious in this sort of thing, I think they need to, explore it more and talk to people like you and find out more, and, make sure they get their annual physicals, both, the pap smears and just the regular physicals, because there are so many things that can be caught early. And one of the things I always also tell people is your body can do a lot if you're taking care of it and making sure you get plenty of exercise, eating right, and, filling your body with good things. So let's move on to success. And I'm sure in your field, there's been a lot of trial and error. Why don't you explain to our listeners today how you measure success?
So going into biotech, first of all, I took the chance of changing career fields. I'm using my fund of knowledge in biotech and in drug development and in venture capital and vetting projects to fund and advise others to fund. But that's very different than what I learned just in medical school and in residency. So what I really enjoy is applying technology to problems that have an unmet need present for patients. That's really my sweet spot. So, how did I do that? By taking a leap of faith in myself. Dr. Lerner saw in me what I didn't see in myself. He advised me to go into biotech, and I had no idea what they wanted from me. The first year or two of working for Novartis, I basically told them everything I knew about a disease that they were trying to develop a treatment for. And I got to be known for what they call these one-pagers, where I would define the disease, the normal physiology, the pathophysiology, what we have to treat it right now, why it doesn't work, and what I think could work. And so everybody wanted to be on that one-pager email list at GNF, because whether they were working on that particular disease or not, what they were really learning from me was the thought process, which is the most important thing at the beginning of a project in drug development, is identifying an unmet medical need.
Well, and don't you think, Sandra, too, just kind of thinking that through, when you are explaining what you want it to do, there might be things that are stumbled on. Because I think oftentimes in medical, because again, it's practicing medicine, I think wouldn't that actually open up to those stumbling on things?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if they don't know how the disease affects a human body, it's much more difficult to know how you want to impact that and stop that pathophysiology. So these scientists, engineers, are incredibly intelligent people. Science is really seeking the truth, and they want to find the truth. But knowing where to look is a different thing. Yeah. And that's where the pathophysiology explanation comes in.
Interesting. So don't you think, or what are your thoughts about this, that a lot of therapies are coming forward that are better today than they were, let's say, even 5 years ago?
Absolutely.
And at a quicker rate, too.
Absolutely. What really has brought forward drug discovery is high throughput screening, and that's done by robotics. At GNF, we're the fastest chemical screeners in the world. We screen with our robots 1 million chemical compounds each and every day, and we can complete a drug target screen in 5 days.
Wow.
That's happening right here in San Diego.
Wow. So, see, San Diego is innovative.
Yes.
So let's switch gears a little bit about home life and then your career. How do you balance all of that? Because I know that a lot of our listeners will say, I'm failing. And there are many times that I felt like I was failing too. And then I would go, oh, wow, I'm really doing well today. And then, it's very cyclical. So how do you balance that?
Well, I'm a big planner. I never go to bed at night without planning and laying out everything that I need for the next day. Going so far as putting it in my car, which is, I fortunately in a garage, of course, but I put everything in there that I need. It was much more difficult. I have 3 sons, so it was much more difficult when they were in school. The youngest is 19 now, so they're all young adults. But it's really the prep. It's the planning. And I have calendars. I've been fortunate enough to have help at home because of the jobs that I do and because my husband's a neurosurgeon and he also has a big job.
Yeah.
So we plan. I would sit and plan with my help at home with calendars so that everything's on the calendar and everybody knows what the plan is because, it doesn't always go to plan. But if you don't start with a plan, your rate of success is going to be lower.
True. I always have a plan A and then a plan B because I feel like no matter what happens, there's always going to be something that's going to change. And then I have to be prepared for that. And if I don't have a plan B, I'm so nervous.
Yes.
I feel like I just have to have it.
Yes. And I absolutely had to have it because of my 3 sons. My oldest has high functioning autism. So changes in a schedule are a much bigger deal to him than they are to other people that don't have autism. Yeah. So we know that having a schedule and a plan may not be what happens, and that's part of the process of teaching him to live in our world that has a very different perspective than what his mind provides him.
That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, I bet he's probably more resilient than he would have been if you weren't always speaking to him like that.
Absolutely. Yes, he's been persevering. He'll get his 2-year community college associate's degree at Miracosta.
That's awesome.
He has 12 more credits to go,
Wow.
and then he will have that. But he's 29 years old now, and he has been persevering all this time and reaching that goal.
That's great.
Yeah.
So talking about barriers in our careers, let's switch back to that. What do you think one of the most significant barriers is as a woman in your profession?
I think one of the most significant barriers is really having faith, having someone have faith in me that I can perform the job that's necessary. Once they work with me, they know how I work and they understand my fund of knowledge and what I can bring to the project to have it succeed. But not knowing me just on the face of it, if they're choosing between a man and a woman, I never know if the choice they're making is really related to gender or related to the fact that, they don't know my fund of knowledge compared to a man's fund of knowledge applying for the same position or for the same project, because they might not take the chance to look. There might be a bias that a man is automatically going to do this tough work better than a woman. When I first started in venture capital, for example, one of my companies was going through a Series C financing, and it was in the 08-09 economic downturn.
Yeah, that was tough.
And two of the smaller VC firms didn't show up with their pro rata. They had what's called a pay-to-play scenario in each financing, where each firm that had invested had to invest the same percentage no matter how big the next round was. And they couldn't raise that money. Well, I was a co-founder of the company. It was my target. And I told them, I think I can raise it, because I had talked to my youngest brother and said, do you think we can do this and form a new private firm? And he said, we called around and said, yes, I think so. Well, they laughed when I told them. And I said, give me 3 months. What do you have to lose? Where else are you going to get the money?
Right.
Nobody else is giving it to you. So they said, okay, we'll wait 3 months. Well, we raised it, the exact amount to the penny, and we've come up with the exact amount to the penny ever since with each financing. But had I not put my foot in the door at that time and spoken up, that never would have happened.
So it seems to me that maybe when you face resistance from, I don't know if it was specifically men or men and women.
It was all men.
All men. I think the way that you have overcome that is you have proven your work product and you deliver the results that you say that you're going to. I think that a lot of times people underestimate women. I don't know if it's just me or if you feel that too. I think I always have to over deliver too. I feel like I have to go over and above. Unfortunately, because I know that if a man were doing the same job as me, many times they wouldn't have to overperform. But I do it just because that's my work ethic. But I think that there are a lot of people that underestimate women still, believe it or not.
There really are.
Yeah.
And when I go back to Dr. Schultz, if I have difficulty or if I'm really working on something and having a little bit harder time in it, he always says to me, look, Richard got your foot in the door, but you kept the door open. Don't forget that.
You kicked it open.
That's right.
You kicked it open. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a minute about mentors. I think Dr. Schultz would probably be one of them.
He's one of them for sure to this day.
Yeah.
We're still on a 5 a.m. email basis because we're both early risers.
Okay.
And I don't email him every day at 5 a.m. and he doesn't email me every day. But when he needs something or I need something, that's usually when it happens. And that's when we make it happen, whatever is necessary.
I think it's always good to bounce off ideas off people that are thinking along the same lines, maybe not exactly the way that you're thinking, but I think that always helps you kind of get past hurdles sometimes when you run into roadblocks. Ideas where you're like, okay, I just can't figure this part out about it. And then bouncing things off. And, that's real collaboration. A lot of people talk about collaboration, but they don't really know how to execute it. It sounds to me like that's something that you are doing on a regular basis.
Yes, and there's really no barrier. I'm never opposed to receiving a text or a phone call or an email from a business colleague or, a personal friend, what have you, to try to help, solve a problem that's come up. And, I used to tell my medical students and residents that I taught, because I was on associate faculty at UCSD when I was in clinical practice, all the problems that you're going to see, I've already seen. So if you have a question, just ask, because that's the best way to avoid a mistake.
Well, and you don't always have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
I mean, that's the good thing. Whenever someone has, and I think mistakes are just as important as actually successes. Whenever you've made a mistake, there's no need to do it again. There's no need for someone else to do it. I try to always be real with people and say, hey, listen, I've tried that. That didn't work, and here's why. And if they choose to make the same mistake, well, then, they definitely can. But I think there's so much knowledge and wisdom in watching people's success and failure and then figuring it out from that. So just talking about lessons and things that you've learned, what are some lessons that you've learned that you'd like to share with our listeners today that they could apply to their lives in leadership?
Well, one thing that I really thrive on is a saying. I have 2 sayings on my desk, and one of them is, in the middle of difficulty is opportunity.
Yeah.
And I really believe in that because it forces you to be scrappy and to find a way. You've got to find a way. I feel really that life is like flowing water. When you meet resistance, that's not the way you're supposed to be going. You've got to go the way that the water flows the best for you.
Right.
So that's one thing. The other saying that I have is don't stumble over something behind you. And I think that speaks to the mistakes that I've made in my life, like everyone has. I don't want to dwell on them and have them prevent me, from moving forward in a positive way. I'm a glass half full person, not a glass half empty person.
One of my favorite sayings is make it happen. And again, that's back to my plan A, plan B. I just feel like many times things just don't work out exactly the way that we see them. And you never really look, I think when you look back and you say, okay, that didn't work out, but here's why it didn't work out, and kind of back to don't stumble on something that's behind you. I love that saying because many times we don't really know why that didn't work out until we're kind of looking back and go, oh, I see. If that had happened that way, then I wouldn't be where I am today. And usually it's in a much better place, in a much better position. And again, many of the things that we fail at, we actually learn from. And so I think that's, something important for our listeners to really hold on to, because when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't always feel that way.
Yes.
So what are you most passionate about? I mean, I can tell you love your job, which I think that's great. What are you most passionate about right now that you would like to share with us today?
So one of the things I've really enjoyed is participating in group philanthropy. So I've been a member of the Rancho Santa Fe Women's Fund for many years. I was a former advisory chair, and I really believe in their mission of vetting charities all in San Diego County. We get over 100 applications every September, and we give out, this past year was our largest amount, $500,000, all to local charities. So over the past 20 years, we just had our 20th anniversary, we've given away $5.7 million.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that has been both a social, fun thing to do with women that are like-minded. The other thing that I'm very passionate about is education at every level. So I'm a trustee for La Jolla Country Day School and really believe in the mission of the school, but really the mission of all schools in providing our kids a fund of knowledge that can sustain them and can provide a choice for them to choose a career that fits them. Whether that's a trade school, where they would be good at a trade, and we need those trades.
We do.
In our society.
Yep.
Or a university, or graduate school, or even just deciding for themselves that they want to self-educate as they go along in a job of their choosing. So I really feel strongly about education. And lastly, I'm a big supporter of the arts. I am told by my friends that I'm an artsy type of person, which I consider a compliment.
It is, definitely.
Yes, and I think if we don't support the artists, whether it's in visual or performing arts, we're not going to have them. And they provide the beauty that we see.
I was just going to say they enrich our lives so much, really. And, whether it's music or visual arts, there's so many things to appreciate. And to be honest, we're all so busy. A lot of times people don't think about what that brings to value to your life, because I think you can handle more stress. You can enjoy life so much more when you are taking a bit of a deep breath and saying, okay, even if it's like going to the flower fields. I mean, something as small as that, or going and looking at the ocean. I mean, there are tiny things that you can do every day that help you get through those rough patches of life, which we all have them. And I love the whole thing about the education, and that there's definitely a different path for each one of us. I try to always encourage people to find their passion, because when you find that passion, whether it's being in the medical field, or being someone that's building something with their hands or making something with their hands, or, out there just inspiring, like being a speaker of some sort. There's so many different, different careers, different things in life that really enrich people's lives. And when you're finding something that you're really passionate about, it just feels so different than if you're actually forcing it. I mean, there's nothing sadder than seeing someone miserable in their job.
Yes.
And you're just going, oh my gosh, it's so painful to even watch them.
Yeah. And if you're passionate about something, you're usually good at it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's really what I appreciate, because I need all those people.
Absolutely.
I need the hairdresser. I need, the person who is,
again, artists.
Yes.
They are artists.
Artists.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So so the last bit of advice that you would give to our listeners today, something that maybe the next generation of leaders would need to know, what would you give them as far as advice goes?
My last piece of advice, which is a piece of advice that involves trying to form judgment of others around you, not judging what they're doing, but judgment as far as whether there's somebody that you need around you that is healthy to have around you, that is part of who can lift you up and not tear you down. I think that's a difficult thing to learn to do in this current age of social media and the internet, and especially with COVID having recently happened, and that has impacted the social development of kids in particular. My advice would be that when someone shows you and tells you who they are, you need to look and listen to that and decide whether that's somebody that is healthy to be around for you. And that's going to be different for each person. It doesn't involve judging what they look like or how much money they have or what they do or what car they drive or what house they live in. Has nothing to do with that. It has to do with how they behave toward you and how they behave as a human being and what their priorities in life are, and whether that really meshes with what your priorities are and how you behave.
And the value that they bring to your life.
Exactly.
And the value they bring to your journey and what you're trying to do. Because it's true, a lot of people can detract from what you're trying to do and aren't helpful. And then it really is very draining and it drags you down a bit. I have always tried to, and still in my kids, find people that are going to build you up always. And I always say to my daughter, don't ever be a mean girl. Mm-hmm. There are so many women out there that do tear down other women, and we need to be a champion. There are so many, there's a seat for everyone at the table, a seat for every single one of us. And trying to figure out how to encourage and inspire other women is just something that I think it's kind of set aside sometimes. And it really is a shame, because we can do so much more together.
Absolutely. And there is no purpose to tear someone else down. I don't know what the goal of that is, but it's not a positive goal. I
try to always look at it, hurting people try to hurt others.
Yes.
And just keep it in that mindset so I don't have anger toward them. And I just, again, are they bringing value to my life? If not, then I'm going to have to set them aside, because that is really good advice. So what's next for you? What do you got going on? I'm dying to hear.
So right now, I am in the midst of doing a financing to grow Toragen. And we are hoping to make our company larger. And we have another product that will be coming along in development that we will be in licensing and becoming a much more sophisticated and complex company, because what I would like to do is hire more scientists and go faster in this drug development to get this drug to the patients that need it.
And you know what? I think that will happen. I mean, first of all, you're motivated. Secondly, I think there's so much talent out there, and we really do have a good talent pool here in San Diego County. And you might even, nationally even, well, actually maybe even the world. I mean, really getting the right people to do the right work. But I feel like things are going so fast now in medicine. Again, practicing medicine, but also we're learning so much more, and how all of our health fits together in different pieces, but how it's becoming more of a puzzle, and it fits together differently, I think, than it did even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, it just seems to be going so much faster.
Yes, and what we're really after is personalized medicine.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
What particular illness do you have that we can treat in a particular way that will be best for you to cure the illness and avoid the side effects?
Yes. Well, I avoiding the side effects is a big deal, definitely. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sandra. What a fascinating conversation, and really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the forum.
Thank you.
Now that was powerful. We hope you've been lifted and encouraged by today's inspiring voice. Always remember that life doesn't look exactly the same for each one of us. Never stop dreaming, striving, and thriving. In future episodes, we look forward to bringing you powerful stories from amazing women who learn how to lead in to challenges. Thank you for listening and being part of our community with SheEO host Rebecca Jones.